by Vitaliy.
All right, do you want me to move to this
Well, no,
side?
you can stay in here. Can you see me, or do I have to get down to Vitaly's height? Is this better? Is this working?
There you go.
All right. So how many people are in right now?
Like 11, I think.
11?
Yeah, we have 11 in.
All right, cool. All right, well, thanks, guys. Sorry for starting maybe
No, we're pretty much on time.
right on time. This is good for us. We're usually like 20 minutes late. But thanks for signing up and participating. We're going to be trying to do more weekend workshops this year. As probably some of you know, that we went on hiatus last year. So for Columbus Web Group, we kind of took a pause from monthly meetups as well as weekend workshops. But this year, we're doing monthly meetups every single month. Our next one's February 28th. Brian Link's talking about So You Think You Can Agile. And it's kind of a take on not a traditional Agile talk. So if you're not familiar with Agile, you should be able to walk away with the knowledge of what Agile is, but then some use cases. And then if you work in an Agile environment, you'll learn about some tips, tricks to do to improve the project process. And then outside that, if you don't work in an Agile environment, how you can start the communication about team collaboration, all these different things that you can do. April, we have some folks from AEP talking about the history of innovation. So a lot of times when people think about corporations, they kind of forget that, or they don't think a lot of innovation is coming from them. But AEP is a 110-year-old company, and the reason why they're a 110-year company in the energy field is because they've done innovation over the past 100 years. So they're talking about that, but kind of the history of innovation. And then in April, and we're planning on this one to be on my birthday, so it's going to be my birthday present to myself. Jay Klaus is speaking, and it's talking about his background story of being an introvert, and then how he kind of converted over to being like the person that he is today in the community. So that's going to be a really, really good one. For weekend workshops, these are limited to a smaller group. We send you an email and we say, hey, what do you want to get out of the class? And then people like Vitaliy base a course around you. And we want to try to make this be as collaborative as possible. So Vitaliy put together a demo. He's going to give some overviews of what React is. So by the end of this class, you should understand React, how to set up your first project in React. And then he's going to go through this demo and teach you tips and tricks on ES6 as well as ReactJs. If you have questions during the presentation, we have Andy that's moderating. You can't see him, but hi, Andy. So if you have questions, use the chat or just speak up. Vitaliy can't hear you right now. He can slightly hear you, but Andy's going to be taking those questions and then moderating them and then speaking them to Vitaliy. And when we find a good stopping point, we'll interrupt him so we can get those questions answered. If you have any suggestions on any future weekend workshops, hit us up on Twitter, which is CBus Web Group, or on Facebook, which is Columbus Web Group, or at any of our events, just come up. If you're interested in presenting at a Columbus Web Group as a presenter like Vitaliy, also don't hesitate to reach out to us. But that's my summary. I'm super excited. Vitaliy, I met him at Startup Week. I'm like leaning really weird because I'm afraid that my head's getting cut off. You're not really that much shorter than me, so is it?
You're cut off now. There you go.
All right, there we go. So anyways, I'm really excited to have Vitaliy do this presentation. I met Vitaliy at Startup Week last year. He was part of the mentoring group that was there, and he was looking for some jobs, some contract work, and kind of growing his own personal experience. And then within the past 6-8 months, it's been really, really awesome to watch Vitaliy grow and take on a lot of responsibility. So I actually have the pleasure of working with Vitaliy every single day at Vibe, and he's just been crushing it. So we've done a lot of cool things like the Vibe app, which is a complete rewrite, and it's all in ReactJs. It's this crazy hybrid application that's also in PhoneGap. I don't know if you're going to talk about that, but it's awesome. And that's all because of Vitaliy. And he teaches me tips and tricks every single day. So I'm sure you guys will learn a lot. But please make sure you participate. And that's all I'm going to say. Vitaliy's awesome. And it's almost his birthday. There's a question.
Is there a date for the AAP meetup?
No, not yet. There's 2 dates that we're looking at. And I think I can publicly say this. there is a new office that the AEP Innovation Lab is about to announce, and it's in the same location of the Root Insurance. So it's like the state-of-the-art, really cool space. That's where the event's going to be. So we're going to be hosting it there. I'm going to say it's the last Thursday. It's either the last or second to last Thursday of March. So we'll be putting those up on meetup.com. But I can continue to talk, which I won't. But thank you guys for joining on a Saturday. It definitely means a lot to have the community participate in things like this. But let me do a warm welcome for Vitaliy. So everyone at home, just start clapping. It makes me feel good with that. All right. Thanks, Vitaliy.
Hello, my name is Vitaliy, and like Kevin said, I've been working with him for about 6 to 8 months now. So I've been a programmer for about 6 years, but I've been doing web development for about 3 years now. And more recently, I've had the pleasure to work in React, which is this amazing framework that lets you build like really cool front-end applications. And I just want to share with you today some of the things I've learned and some of the process I use like when designing a React application. So we're going to go over, let's see here. Yeah, let's just jump right into this. We're going to first start with using create React app, which is a cool little NPM command that lets you create a pre-configured React app in any directory. So this will let us create a boilerplate React app, and then we can modify it to be what we want it to be. So I don't know why those two came in at once, but next we'll cover ES6 syntax, and I'm going to focus on this for quite a bit of time because I think it's I think it will make your life a lot easier in React if you really understand ES syntax, and I think it will just lead you to encounter less bugs as you're working in React. So then we're going to talk about asynchronous JS, callbacks, promises, async await. And we're going to talk about asynchronous JS because in this demo app that we're making, we're actually going to be making AJAX requests and getting data from 2 different APIs, which I'll show you the demo in a second. So this will be important to understand to be able to write our app. Okay, so next we're going to dive into React and talk about what JSX is and what it helps us do. And we're going to talk about both function and class-based components, like what they are, what we're going to use them, and just best practices for working with components. So then this is what is really the meat and potatoes of React. This is we're going to talk about this for quite a bit of time. This lets us pass data between components. So props lets us pass data between components down to child components. And state allows us to make, let's say, smart components that are self-aware, and they know when to re-render when their data changes. This component lifecycle is really important. We'll talk about this more, but in larger React apps, it's very important to clean up resources. So when you're changing your components in the app are placed into and out of the DOM, it's important to clean up data after they leave the DOM. So this component lifecycle is when a component first gets constructed, and then the lifecycle is a series of methods that correspond to how the component enters and exits the DOM, and they let you write some code at the moment that happens. So like I said, so you can clean up event listeners, query selector, stuff like that. The code that's dependent on the component DOM being on the page, basically. So next up is React Router. This will let us use routing like this in the browser, but without talking to the server. So this will let us do routing on the client side, which will make our app so it doesn't have to reload, basically. And then I'm going to touch on forms because you'll be working a lot with forms in React. And it's important to mention how React handles forms because the inputs are closely tied to state. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And then if we have time, I would like to go over the context API, which will allow you to have global state in your applications, which is really nice for larger applications because you can have all your main functions and the main state of the app just all in one place. Instead of having to pass it through 5 layers of components, you can just grab it directly from here. All right, so let's go over the demo app that we're going to try to finish. I'm not sure if we'll get to the end of it, but if not, I'll make a follow-up video finishing up. So this will be a little game here where we're connecting to 2 different APIs. So first we're getting 8 different images from the Unsplash API, which is free, and we'll go over how you can get an API key for that. And then we're picking an image at random here. It is not shown to the user. And then we're taking that image and sending it to another API, which classifies the image using machine learning. So it's basically an image classifier, general purpose image classifier that is going to give us percentage values. So if I hit play again, you'll see that it'll give us percentage values for what it thinks the image is. And we've chosen the top 5 here. And the purpose of the game is to try to guess. I realized quickly it was actually a really easy game with random images. So I think having it be like a specific search query like cat is gonna it's gonna make it a little bit more difficult because all of these are cats. I mean, like which one is this referring to? Okay, so if you choose an incorrect one, you'll see like a red box appears, and you can't click on any of the other ones, but the correct one is shown. And let's try, so window, snow, fall, winter, cat. I'm guessing it's this one. So as you can see, I chose the correct one, and a green box appears around it, and all of these are locked now. So we'll try to get this done today, hopefully. I think we can do it. Okay, so let's go and talk about Create React App. Create React App, okay. What is it? It lets us utilize NPM to quickly get all required dependencies and configure a boilerplate React app. So it's going to do a bunch of things for us that are very tedious and not necessarily and are the same across all React apps. So we might as well just use this to configure it how we want. And then we have a couple of configuration options after that. So here are the commands for npx, npm, and yarn. I use npm for most of my dealings with the Node packages, but to install Create React App, this is probably the easiest because you don't have to have, this actually fetches it from the React servers, or I think from GitHub, instead of having to have this package on your machine. And that's the benefit of npx, I think. So let's get started. Throughout the presentation, we're going to be switching between this deck here and us coding the app. So as we're moving through the presentation, we'll be applying what we learned in code. So okay, I've prepared a folder here. Create React Intro Live. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, and if you're on Mac, if you're on Mac and you have, I'm using a Windows PC here, but if you're on Mac and you have any questions, we do have Kevin Mac here to help you out with Mac-related issues. So if just post a question or ask in the Zoom, and then we'll try to get back to you. But most of the commands I'm entering will be the same, except you'll be using terminal instead of PowerShell. But I will be using PowerShell here. So we're going to go ahead and grab this directory. And we're going to cd into it. This is just Linux terminal commands, which you can learn about. Basically, if you want to do any web development outside of front-end development, but nowadays even with front-end development, you're going to have to learn NPM and how to basically deal with the Linux terminal. Essentially, there's only a few commands. There's cd, which is change directory. So right now I'm in this directory, but I'm going to change into the directory that I just copied. And now you can see here's my new path. And this is where I can run commands now in this directory. So one command I can run is ls. This is going to show me, stands for list, I believe. And this is going to show me what's in this directory, which is nothing right now. But if I make a file here, you can see we have that file. New text document. pwd prints the current working directory, print working directory, which we can see here, so there's no really reason for using this command. What's the other ones? I would recommend just going and searching more about it on the internet. This technology has been around for a very long time, and there's lots of very good tutorials on it. But essentially, this lets you interact with your computer directly instead of using an interface like this. So we're going to go ahead and run that command to create our React app. So we're going to use npx here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Or let's type it out. I'm actually going to turn off this demo app that we had. So we only have one PowerShell. Okay. So.
Can I just say one thing? If there's any questions about anything specific that anyone wants, we can do a weekend workshop in the future on that topic. So things like yarn, grunt, npm, and all the setups. We've done an npm in the past. So if anyone has any specific questions or they're confused as they learn, just reach out to us and we can do that. And one thing I forgot to mention is we are recording this. So
this will be available later on YouTube.
Will be available later. So if you want to more sit back and watch this, and then
yeah, I can actually touch on that. I've already made this app before, so I'm going to be rushing through it kind of fast to try to make it into the 3 hours. But if you want to follow along later, go ahead and we'll have a YouTube video where you'll be able to follow along at your own pace and make this demo app yourself, and then maybe build something even better on top of it. Who knows? Before I continue, you're going to need to have Node installed on your machine. This is really easy. All you have to do is go to node.org, I think. Oh, nodejs.org. So here's the 2 downloads or this is going to detect automatically what OS you have. So for Windows, we can download the current one, or the latest stable release, or the most recent release. And once you download, just go through the install process, and it should configure everything in that installer, so you'll be able to use the npm right afterwards. It's going to add it to your the environmental variable to your path for you. But if for some reason it doesn't, that might be what's going on. Okay, so let's go ahead and run npx create react app. Actually, you know what? I forgot to mention something. This is actually going to create a directory in here. So it's going to be like CWG React Intro Live, and then there's going to be another directory in here that's going to be have the same name. So instead, we're just going to go ahead and delete this directory, and just make it in this folder. So I'm going to go. I'm going to type in cd ... which is the parent directory. cd ... is the current directory. cd ... is the parent directory. So now I've changed directory into the parent directory, and I'm going to run npx create react app cwg react intro -live. Okay, so we're going to let it do its thing. This might take a few minutes depending on how fast your machine is, but it should not take very long. I would say maybe 2-3 minutes at the most. Okay, cool. So now we have our CWG React Intro Live Create React app. So you're gonna want to have a code editor installed. From the survey results, I believe most people in the survey responded they were already developers on some level. So I assume you already have a favorite code editor. But if you do not, I recommend VS Code. It's the most popular one right now, and it has the most support for extensions and themes, and like Emmet's really good in it, which lets you type out HTML really quickly. And it lets you just configure all kinds of things. It's made by the same guy that made the Eclipse IDE. So people really like that one, and people really like this one too. So this is the wrong app. This was the demo app. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Documents, and then if you have VS Code in Windows, you can just open a directory with VS Code. So what do we have in here? We have a public directory. So let's look in here. Favicon.io, index.html. This is where our index.html file will go mainly, and then also any meta-related information to the HTML document. So like the fav icon, and this is for I think this is a new Google standard for single page apps to be able to identify themselves to Google and provide information about what it is. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and delete all these 3 files in here. I don't have one. Okay, so in SRC, this is the main directory that we're going to be working on. As you can see, Create React App made some files in here for us. So app.css. Or actually, before I delete those 3 files. Okay, well, so the way we start the app is after you've made it, once you're going to cd into the directory that you just made. And if you start typing the name of it and you press tab, most terminals will auto-complete for you. And then in here, you can type npm start. And this will start your app. And it will, the reason it starts on a live server like this is because it makes it really easy to do development, because when you save a file or when you add a new file to your directory structure, it's going to refresh the page for you, so you don't have to refresh it all the time. Oh, I'm in the wrong app. So I'm going to cd ... again. So this time I will manually type it out because it has that live at the end. -intro -live. On the terminal? Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm not really sure how to do it in PowerShell. Okay, so let's, I didn't write cd, so cwg react intro -live. Okay, so now we're going to run npm start in here. Sorry about that. This will show us what the blank app is, what it looks like when you first start it up. Cool. So this means this is actually like a React app right now, so it's working. So let's go ahead and start editing some files. So like I said, first we're going to delete everything. We're actually going to delete everything and do everything from scratch here. So app.css, app.js. Let's go ahead and leave app.js, and we don't need this. The service worker is something, once your app is live, this is something you can enable to improve the performance of your app, but it's not something we need for this. So we're going to go get rid of all those files. And then in here, we're going to get rid of all of this. This is just the demo React app. Okay. This is your top level file. So as you can see, there's some stuff about the service worker that you can see here. So this is the file where you mount your React app to a DOM element. So as you can see, what we're doing here is, just so you can see more clearly, I'm going to get rid of this too. So we're going to use a library called React DOM, which is a library that helps you, that lets you place React elements into the DOM with, so it's a function, the React DOM.render, that you can pass a React component to, and then the second argument is where to append the component, which is we're looking for a element with an ID of root. So let's go ahead and make our HTML file real quick here. So we're going to put it in public, new file. And then if you're in VS Code, you can just do, well, it's kind of weird sometimes. If you do X5, it'll do just like a regular boilerplate document. We'll call it CWG. These are just meta tags that most pages have, so that's why they're in the boilerplate. So what are we going to do here? We're going to make a div, or actually I'm going to show you emet real quick. So div hashtag, which is the symbol for IDs, and we're going to call it root, and then you press tab, and it makes a div with an ID of root. Okay, so we have that. Now let's make our app.css file here. So we're going to talk about components later, but I'm just going to write this out real quick. This here, this is an ES6 import statement. So we're importing, we can declare a variable here. This is what we're going to call it in this file. It's not necessarily the variable name that we're exporting, that React is exporting from this library here, React. And the way it knows to find this is we specify the library name, and then it goes and looks in node modules to see if there's a library that matches this. And that library is going to export something, and something, it can be anything. And we're importing it as React here. Cool. And just to show you this, I don't usually do this, but if you want, you can actually import the component property off of React. So we're actually going, this ES6 syntax means that we're drilling into React and we're extracting a property called component from it. So okay, this, don't worry about this for now. I'm going to write out a quick React component. So we're going to just write a real quick hello world message here to make sure that we're connected correctly. This is just what this component is outputting from its render function. Okay, and when we declare a component like this, we have to export it. And this is exactly what React is doing here. It's exporting React just like this, but in the main file of the React library. So we're going to export app. And we don't necessarily have to call it app in the other file, but we're exporting this class here. We can call it whatever we want in the other app. The value of this will just get assigned to that variable in the other file. So export, we're actually going to do export default app. And then I'm going to save this. And in the other component, in index.js, our main file, we're going to call it, we're going to import it so we can render it. Import app. We don't have to call it this from, and when you're dealing with libraries, you can just write their name. But if you're dealing with files, you actually have to provide the file path. So where's app? It's in the same folder as index.js. So we can use the dot syntax from before, dot slash. So current directory slash app dot js. Okay. So let's see if that worked. We have an error. So these errors are very useful. React is great with providing useful errors. So on line 8, parsing error, unexpected token in our app.js file. So let's look at it. What is the unexpected token? This return here. Okay, so we're using return as a function. Instead, we should just be using it with the parentheses. This is just a way to group things in JavaScript. If you want to group like, it's the same as like mathematical like parentheses. So if we wanted to do this on one line, we don't have to use them. But if we want a multi-line, we have to use them. So let's see if that fixed it. Yes, we have hello world on the screen. Okay. So while we're here in this app component, I'm going to go ahead and change its file name to JSX. Now, this is going to let VS Code know that this is using JSX, and it's going to let us use JSX shortcuts or HTML shortcuts in our JSX files. JSX is essentially very similar to HTML, and we'll go over that in a little bit as well. And now I have to remember to import it as JSX here too. So for let's do a little bit of setup for our app here. That thing is so annoying. Okay, so we're going to use a CSS framework called Materialize CSS to quickly to make our app look decently nice instead of just default HTML elements. So let's go here, get started with Materialize. So we're going to use the CDN version. So let's just go ahead and copy this code here. These are script tags that we're this is a link tag and a script tag that we're going to use in our index.html file to go ahead and grab these libraries so we can use them in our app. So in our index.html, which is in public here, let's first do the link tag. So we're going to copy this script tag or cut it for now, and we'll. So now we're linking the materialize.min.css CSS library here. But materialize CSS also requires JS to function. So we're going to go ahead and import the JS too. Let's import it at the bottom here. Okay, so if we look at our app now, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this. Node.js. We can save that because we'll have to reference it later. So this is Times New Roman, a very ugly font. We're going to go ahead and save this file, and you can see the styles get immediately applied, and we get a much nicer looking font because we imported those libraries. Cool. So this is the setup. What else do we need in here? Okay, I think we're almost ready to go back to the presentation and talk about ES6. But before we do that, let me pull up the snippets thing in Chrome so we can run code short snippets really quickly. Where is it here? Oh, yeah, I think they changed this.
They didn't change it. You're just doing it live.
All right, let's look this up real quick. under sources and then snippets. I thought that's where I was just at now. Oh, okay. So here it is. Cool. So let's make a new snippet. We'll call it CWG React. And we can even show the terminal here. Hopefully. Okay, so cool. Now we can run really quick code really easily.
Question.
Okay.
Does React automatically handle ES6, or do we have to separately use a transpiler?
So create React app. It compiles all those libraries and configures our app so we can use ES6. But now you can use ES6 pretty much anywhere. You can use it in the Chrome browser here, so that's not even necessary. But yeah, if you wanted to use like some other like TypeScript or something, I think there's libraries for it, but don't quote me on that. So anyway, let's go back to the presentation. Did that answer the question? Sorry.
If it didn't answer the question, post back in chat. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's go to the next slide here. ES6 syntax. So we're going to cover, this is just an overview of what we're going to cover. So what's new? Let and const. We're going to be using this pretty much always and never var. And I'll explain in a little bit why. I don't know why these keep coming in two at once, but okay. Template literals. This is going to let us do string concatenation very easily, and it's going to look much nicer than regular string concatenation. Conditional operator. This is the shortcut for if-else in ES6, and it is the only JavaScript operator that requires 3 operands. So you can't do just if. You have to do if and else. So arrow functions. React is going to use these a lot. And it's with asynchronous JS, we're going to use them, and we'll go over why they're very useful in React. We'll go over array methods. I have a bunch of these on here, but it looks like we're not going to have time to cover all of them, so I'll just cover the basic ones. Let's go to spread syntax. This is just easier to show than talk about. Classes. We're going to cover ES6 classes, which React uses for state components or smart components. We're going to cover promises really quickly. Promises are kind of difficult to wrap your head around, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. But with all of these things, I'll point you to MDN, which is the best resource for finding out what JavaScript stuff does, or what JavaScript, like built-in JavaScript functions do. So if we do like array.map, MDN array.map. So we can see it. This is the most detailed. I would not recommend going to a website called W3 School unless you're looking for a really quick answer that's not very complicated. But if you want to really understand something, go here, because they cover it in very great detail. While it might be harder to look at first, this will help you understand it much better than Stack Overflow or W3 Schools will. So this is a very good website. So go back to the slides. And then we're going to touch on async await, which is a cool way of using promises that you can that has better syntax than promises. Let's just say that. Okay, so var, let, and const. Let's talk about var. Current execution context scoped. This means function. So this means it is scoped to the function. So just really quickly, I'll show you if we do if. So if true, which will be true, var temp equals 0. So if we check out temp, so you can see this is not, this is what's called a block in JavaScript, these curly braces here. So the var is not block scoped. It's scoped to the current execution context, which is here, it's the main function that runs in JavaScript. So I will have access to temp, will I? Oh, okay. Okay, this is another topic that we're going to talk briefly on, hoisting. So JavaScript, before any of your code ever runs, JavaScript goes and looks at all the variables and assigns them either a value of undefined with var or a value of nothing, which will throw an error. So it's not assigned a value, but is placed in memory, assigned a place in memory. So as you can see, we're console.logging temp. We assigned it a value of 0 in this block, but it prints out as undefined because it is set a value of undefined when it is hoisted, but this code is not going to be accessible in this scope because it's outside of the block. So, and that's why we use let. So can be reassigned and redeclared. This means that we can redeclare a variable, so we can use the var keyword again with the same variable name and give it a different value, which I think will give it a different place in memory, but I'm not sure about that. Initializing is optional, so that means you can not give it a value. This is called initializing. So we're not initializing it now. And it will not throw an error. We just get undefined. But if we do something like const, which we'll touch on in a second, you'll see that it does throw an error. It is added to the window object. So if you look at console.log window, and we're going to change this back to var. The window object has a whole bunch of methods and properties for interacting with this window here. So right now I'm resizing the window. This is the window, the white space here. And it's where your DOM lives, and it has all kinds of methods for interacting with the DOM. So I've declared the variable, so let's run this code real quick. So you can see all of those properties here. Oh, I should have done this before, but I'll make the font a little bigger here. So what do we, temp. So let's look for temp. Where is temp? There it is. So as you can see, this does not happen with Latin const. It does not get assigned to the window object. Okay, so let, block scoped, like we talked about before. Let temp equals 0. And this is not hoisted, so we should get an error here. Oh, and if you're in the terminal or in the Chrome JavaScript terminal console, you can hit Control L to clear, or just type clear. Well, I think it's clear executed as a function. Yeah. So let's go ahead and run this code. Okay, we get a value of undefined. I think, okay, so let actually does get hoisted, but if we, okay, yeah, let gets hoisted, but it's block scoped, so as you can see, again, we cannot access the value. Let me just check something real quick. Oh, but with var we can, as you can see, we get 0 here. But with let we get undefined. I don't know why that's printing twice, but okay. So more about let. Can be reassigned but not redeclared. So you cannot use the let keyword with the same variable name again to redeclare it. Initializing is optional. So just like var, you don't have to. You can just declare the variable but not initialize it. It is not added to the window. You just have to trust me on this one. I don't want to look it up again. Block scoped. Oh, okay, so const. It is block scoped just like let. So it means it is not scoped to the current execution context, but instead it is scoped to the block. And I feel like I didn't explain this really well enough. Let me just provide a really quick example of when why you want to use let and not const. So we're just going to do a quick for loop here. For var I equals 0, I so say you're in this for loop, and then after you're done with the for loop, you want to console.log the variable that we declared I. So let me see what happens here. Okay, so we get, again, I don't know why this is printing twice. Maybe it's something I'm doing wrong, but as you can see here, we get I equals 10 because this is in the same block as this code here. So console.log is in the same block as this code here up until this point. This is another block. Whatever is inside here is another block. But so with let, it is only assigned to this block here, so we cannot access it outside. Do I have like another snippet or something? Okay, we can just do this in the console. Okay, so in general, we want to use, so let's talk more about const. Can't be reassigned nor redeclared because it's a constant. So you want to declare variables. Every time you declare a variable, you want to think about whether it's going to change or not. So the general rule for this is always use const unless it needs to be changed. Then use let. And you should pretty much never use var. But there, in the Chrome developer tools, sometimes you can't redeclare let, but you can redeclare var. So sometimes people use var in the Chrome developer tools, but as a general rule, you should always use let and const. Not immutable. So if you assign a object to const, you can actually change that object. You just can't assign it another object. Because when you assign an object to const, its value gets passed to const. JavaScript deals like in a weird way with objects. They are when you assign a variable to an object, it just passes that place in memory to that object. So if you alter that new variable, it's going to alter both the old variable and the new variable unless you specifically declare a new object, which there's methods of doing. So if you run into bugs where you're changing your object, but it's also changing on the variable that you pass the value from, you're going to have to reassign that object. Const must be initialized. You cannot just declare it, obviously, because it's a constant. Not added to window, just like let. Okay. So note, variables anywhere on the page get hoisted, assigned to memory. I think we touched on this briefly, but before any other code is executed, when hoisted, vars get a value of undefined, won't result in error, while let is not given a value, which will result in error. For this reason, it is safer to use let and const instead of var. Okay. So let's briefly touch on template literals.
I like how you read that like a disclaimer.
What?
You read it like a disclaimer, like, yeah, I don't know.
I didn't mean to. An intuitive approach for string concatenation. So we're just going to do these code examples in here real quick. So this is how you would normally, in regular JavaScript, concatenate two strings, which means add them together. So you have a string, then you use a plus, then you do a variable, and then plus again, and your second string. So with longer concatenations, this can get really messy really quickly. So template literals give us a way to just embed variables directly into strings with this dollar sign and curly braces. Note though, you have to use backticks, which is that key that's directly below the escape key on your keyboard, instead of quotation marks to have access to this curly braces and dollar sign here.
Completely different location on the Mac.
Really? Okay. So, where is it on a Mac? Should we mention it?
Well, it depends on what, but it's above the tab.
But that's what I said, directly below the escape key.
We don't have an escape key.
You don't have an escape key on Mac? Oh, I never knew that. Okay, well anyway, so above the tab or below the escape key on Windows. I think if you get like external Mac keyboards, they have an escape key. It's probably just a
maybe.
yeah.
Possibly.
Um,
Well, I don't understand why you use Windows. It's a
'Cause-
debate for another day.
Yeah, another day. Okay.
I'm gonna buy you a MacBook.
Conditional operator. So this is a shorthand for an if statement. Must have if and else. You can't just do if, but I'll show you another quick way to do just if that also uses a shorthand. Can be used inside JSX. So this is really cool actually in React because we don't have to wrap this in curly braces because it can be used directly inside of JSX. Unlike with if statements, we have to extract them to another function, and then it's just really messy. This is much easier. So if is authenticated, return welcome message. And this is kind of like a primer to what we'll be doing later. So when you see these things, I don't expect you to understand it yet, but this is kind of like what we'll be doing. So you'll get a taste for the syntax. So if authenticated, we're going to return a JSX element here, and else we're going to return sign up. So how do we do this with a conditional operator? Well, we just do this. So is authenticated is a question mark. This means that like if is authenticated, and the return statement is implied here. So we just return welcome message, just like here. And then at the end of that, we just do a colon, which is the else. And again, the return statement is implied here. So we're returning something else. And I'll mention this again. You must have this and this. You can't just do this. Oh, but if you do want to just use if without else, but with shorthand syntax, you can do if true console.log true. So no need for curly braces here. And then you can also do an else statement below that. Okay. So arrow functions. Let's spend a little bit of time on this. So syntactic alternative to traditional functions. They're very similar except for one exception, and that is the arrow functions do not bind their own this. So in JavaScript, in the current execution context, if you use the this keyword, it refers to the function that is currently being executed. But with arrow functions, this is not the case. With arrow functions, it uses the this of the closest parent that is not an arrow function. So yeah, this is very useful for React because we need the classes this in React. But this is going to let us not have to bind it for every single function in the constructor. Okay, so next useful in React, yeah, just because we can use the class as this keyword without having to bind it to a regular function. Lots of shorthands for using arrow functions, and I'll show you those in a bit. You can basically just write a function in as little as like a few characters, a handful of characters. So here's a regular function. So we use a function keyword, print data, and here's the alternative with arrow functions. So we're actually assigning this one to a variable. So instead of using the function keyword, we're assigning it to a variable. We're assigning an anonymous function. So and arrow functions are anonymous unless we assign them to a variable, and then they behave like the function keyword. Because you're passing the value of this arrow function, which is a function, to print data, which then becomes a function that is called print data, but it has the value of this function that doesn't have a name. So let's just do a couple of quick examples in the browser.
Just timing, we're about an hour in right now. So I don't know if there's any questions just with everything we have.
Okay, I'm almost at a point where we can start doing actual React stuff.
Yeah.
So.
We did find out that old MacBook Pros have escape keys.
I only use the new MacBook Pros.
You gotta go back, go old school.
I actually do remember that. Well, and I have a touch bar, so it's a variable above the tab key.
So fancy.
It's very fancy. I like this view that I have of Vitaliy. This is like perfect. This is hello world, nice trick.
What you said. Okay, so we have two functions. They do the exact same thing. Let's go ahead and call, so we'll just save them here. We'll call print. Does that print 2? It does the same thing. Cool. So let's redefine print2 to use more abbreviated syntax. So we're going to do, let's go ahead and refresh because we can't use const again. Const print2 equals. So let's say we're passing some data into this function. So let's say we're passing a value. We can then, so the first shortcut I'm going to show you is you don't have to use curly braces when you're doing it on one line like this. The return statement is implicit. So we're actually not going to console.log the value here. We're going to return it. So let's return the value. And there we go. This should be enough for us to declare our function. So print2. Let's execute it with that value. So we'll do hello2. The string, that's the value. So this is just going to return that string. And last shortcut, and this is the best one. Again, I'm going to refresh, paste this in. If you're just passing one value, you don't have to use parentheses here. So this is our function. And if it was anonymous, let's just make sure that works. Oh, we didn't pass it a value, so. So it does the same thing, and this would be the anonymous version. Like I said, just a handful of characters, and this is an anonymous function right here. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. So array methods. Again, we don't have time to cover all of these, but let's just go ahead and cover, let's say map. We'll do sort and slice. Okay.
Yeah, those are also in your demo. So.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll just show the difference between map and, so let's define a quick array here. Let's go back to the, hopefully it doesn't start double printing again. So we're just going to have this be random numbers. Okay, so first up, R, which is our array, dot map. So this is an array method that takes a function as an argument. We're just going to use an arrow function here without, and so, okay, let's use an arrow function without the parentheses. So we're gonna, so it's gonna, it returns, it takes an, as an argument, a function that takes as its value the item that you're iterating over. So this actually, in the background, this is using a for loop, and it's iterating over this array. And we can call this whatever we want. So let's say number, num. So this num value is gonna, it's like, it's like R, if you were in a for loop. So this num is equal to this. But if you want just the I, you can pass a second argument here, index. This is going to give you the value of the I in the for loop. So we can close that. And if you're using ES6, well, I already mentioned this, but if you have two arguments, you cannot have parentheses. Or you have to have parentheses with arrow functions. Okay, so for each num, we're just going to console.log it. Let's console.log the index as well. All right. Sweet, I don't think it printed twice. Okay, so, and here you can see, we'll talk about this in a second. So we can see 4, 6, 7, 3, 9. This is our array, and here are the indexes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the difference between map and for each, they're very similar. They're so similar that I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this code. For each. So for each doesn't return an array. It does something for every item in your array. You can do something, but it doesn't actually return the new array. Map is more like for modifying an array. So if you just want to iterate over something and do something for each value, just use for each. But if you want to return a new array with the values that you just, I can just show you this. So in array.map, we're just going to return, we're going to return num. Let's do num squared. Cool. So we're going to comment this out for now. We'll do this in a second. Okay, so if we go ahead and run this, syntax error, R has already been declared. Oh, this is why, this is one instance where we would use var. So even if I use let here, you'll see it'll still complain because R has already been declared. So let cannot be redeclared, but var can. R has already been declared. Oh, I guess with snippets it's different than the console, but we'll just refresh the page just for the sake of it. Okay, so let's do array.map, and we're returning the num squared value. So what is this going to do? This is going to return a new array of all the values squared. Why is it in that order? Just do num times 2. Okay, I don't think that's the right syntax for squaring things in JavaScript, but this is no, I had the like up caret before, but it wasn't working. Okay, so this returned a new array with the values, each one being doubled. Whereas with for each, if we run the same code, and I'm going to have to refresh the page again, r.forEach return num squared. So what is this going to do? It's not, it returns undefined because it's not returning the new array. But if we console.log this, we're not returning. So for each value, we're going to console.log num squared. Oh, yeah. So this is just going to console.log it. Okay, let's go right into array.sort. This is a very useful method because it implements the best sorting algorithms for this purpose. So you don't have to worry about that stuff. You can just use this and be sure that it's sorting as fast as it can. So array, we're just going to type this out from scratch. Sort, and this again takes a regular function as a value, but this function takes two values. It takes a and b, and then so we're going to return b minus a. So what is this going to do? Let's see. So it's sorted in the reverse order. So let's try a minus b. Okay, and now it's in the correct order. So what this is doing is we have a value a and a b. So it's going to use a sorting algorithm to sort over the array a bunch of times, and during each comparison, you're going to have two values, a and b. So we're going to return, in JavaScript, if you return a negative number, it's false, and if you return a positive number, it's true. So if a is larger than b, we're going to return true. And this is how the sorting works. But if b is greater than a, we're going to return a negative number, which is false. And then it does the sorting algorithm with that's enough information for it to be able to sort it how you want. And you can do other fancy things in here, but for the sake of this example, we're just going to leave it at that. Let's see what's another one I wanted to cover. Slice. Slice takes an array and you give it two indexes. Okay, yeah, this is the last one I'll cover here. So array.slice, we pass it two values, 0 and 2. So this is the starting value and the ending value, and it's going to return a new array based on these values. These values. We're actually going to console.log this. What is going on? Let's go ahead and launch that. That was weird. We're back where we started. Okay, cool. So I think Chrome just restarted or something weird. Right. So okay, so this is going to return a new array. Let's do 2. That is just the starting index and the ending index. Or actually, it's one before the ending index, so it's not going to include the ending index. So we just get an array with 4 and 6, which are the first two numbers. Oh, no, so sorry. This is not the ending index. This is the starting position, and this is how far you want to go. So we're starting at 0, and we're going 2 in the positive direction. So we're going 0 and 1 and 2. And then we're slicing it and returning that array.
What counts to 0 as an index?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, so it's 0 and yeah, it's the first 2.
But I'm confused on why it's just...
It's 2 character counts, so if you had 3, you're...
Oh, yeah, I was confusing myself. Yeah, so it's just the 2 character counts after 0, or 2 array values after 0.
Yeah, start at 0.
Okay, so spread syntax, I'll just show you this really quickly. This is something that is super simple, but if you look at it for the first time, you have no idea what it is. So say we have a function called print, we can let's see, how do I explain this? So we can either manually type a bunch of numbers in here, like an array. So this is passing a number as each argument. So there's 4 arguments, and each one of them is a number here. If we just pass an array, though, that's going to be 1 value. That means that you're just passing this whole array and not as 1 argument. So to get around this, what we do is this. This is going to be, let's look at our array again, 4, 6, 7, 3, 9. This here is equivalent to this. So that's really simple, but if you look at this for the first time, it's not going to make any sense. But let's move on.
Great example, Vitaliy. The first time you look at this is not going to make sense. All right.
Well, it's just like a really weird syntax, like 3 dots, like what is that? That's just what we went over. Okay, JS class syntax. Let's go over this real quick because we're kind of pressed for time.
Can we get into the demo and then hit on these as you go through it?
That might take longer actually because I'll have to like bounce back and forth. Let's just go over the class syntax real quick. JS classes are not actually an object-oriented inheritance model. It's just syntactical sugar on top of JavaScript's existing prototype-based inheritance model. Supports for methods and properties, like classes in other languages. So methods are functions that belong to a class and that the class can call on itself. And properties are values that belong to a class. Classes can have a constructor function. So a class is essentially a type of object. So an array is a type of object. Everything in JavaScript is an object. An array is a type of object, but we can declare our own types of objects with classes. And then we can instantiate those objects, so make instances of them with a new keyword. So new, a built-in class type object is date. So this is how you would declare a new date. So you're instantiating an instance of the class date. Okay. So the constructor function is run when you first instantiate a class object. And what it lets you do is perform any initialization that you need on that object. So like if it was a person, you would assign them a name, age, or whatever, and then a couple of functions. But in the constructor method is where you initialize. So you do any prep work before you're going to use the class. And here's the syntax. So you do class, and this is just a React reference here. So class component, one thing we'll be doing in the constructor method is binding this keyword. So if you're not using arrow functions in React, you have to do this in the constructor method. This binds the classes this to the methods this. So this method.bind this. So we're assigning the old method to the new method with this, the classes this bound to it. This is just how you would set up property is all property, and this is how you would set up method. And you can also use arrow function syntax with methods on a class. Okay, promises. Let's go over this really quick. I'm not going to actually type out code, but I'll explain this example that I've written before. So promises let us handle asynchronous code, and they let us better handle error handling when it comes to asynchronous code with the .then and .catch keyword functions that you append at the end. So the way you return a promise is you define a function that returns a promise, and then you put your asynchronous code inside this. So the new promise class, it takes it takes a arrow function as an argument, and this is where you would put your asynchronous code. So you in that arrow function, it expects 2 arguments, resolve and reject. And these are functions that you would call whether your asynchronous code succeeds or not, and this determines which one of these will be called later. So .then or .catch. .catch is for error handling. .then is for you wait until the asynchronous code finishes, and then you do something. So as you can see, we're calling fetch here, and then we're adding the .then keyword. So after this asynchronous code finishes, it's going to return a resolved promise, and we can access that resolved promise and the data that it returns with the .then. So .then also accepts a function that accepts one argument, and that is well, actually, it doesn't have to accept an argument, but as you can see here, we're calling it with the data that we just got from our asynchronous code. And if we don't get that data, if something goes wrong, we reject passing the error that we get from this asynchronous code. So that's how this works. And async await is just a easy syntax to use promises. So it's not a syntax for declaring promises, for declaring functions that return promises. It is a syntax for using promises. A way to use promises with simplified syntax, a function that has another function that returns a promise inside it can be declared as async. So you can see this function, we declared previously, imagine we declared this result function previously, or no, this async function previously, and it returns a promise. So the way we use this is we put async in front of a function declaration to let JavaScript know that this is going to be an asynchronous function. And we cannot do this with arrow functions. We can only do this with regular functions. If you want to use arrow functions, you use the other promise syntax. So const, we're assigning, declaring a variable called result, and then we're assigning the value of a synchronous function, but we use this await keyword to wait for the function to finish and then assign to result whatever it returns. And then this is, async functions can wait. Normally in JavaScript, you cannot just pause execution. It doesn't work that way. But with async functions, you can pause execution here, and that's what this async does. And then once the result is ready, it will go ahead and return it. So that's just an easy way to use promises. And I believe now we can get to the actual React stuff. So JSX, let's talk about JSX for a little bit here. So JSX, and we can take a look at what it looks like here. This is JSX here. This is not HTML, because we can't just return HTML as, this is not a string. This is actually a JavaScript object. So this is what it looks like. If it starts with a capital letter, that means it's a React component, and as you can see, the syntax highlighting picks up on it. But if it starts with a lowercase letter, we're treating it as a JSX element, which is more closely resembling an HTML element than a React component. But it's still not an HTML element. This is an object. Okay. So it's a syntax extension to JavaScript to represent the DOM as JS objects. To represent the DOM as JS objects, like I mentioned, so all those elements are objects known as JSX elements. Okay. Let's us write logic and markup in the same file. So this is, I think, when people refer to React as being fun to work in, I think this is at the heart of it. Because we can dynamically render code to the page in the same file. I think in other frameworks, which I haven't used Angular or Vue, but I believe in other frameworks, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, you cannot write logic and markup in the same file. You have to split them, unless you're embedding JS into HTML, which has kind of a weird syntax.
You could. It's really just using ES6 if you're using a framework. But never mind.
Okay, well, what's special about React is that these are...
That's why React is so awesome.
But, I mean, that's what it says in their doc, so I think they mentioned it there, actually, that Angular doesn't use this. But anyway, this is not a string. Normally in other frameworks, I believe you would have to use a string if you were to return HTML like this. But that's why we have JSX, is so we don't have to deal with strings and weird stuff like that.
Oh, yes. It would have to be a template.
Yeah, so it would have to be like embedded JavaScript, whereas here it's just JavaScript. Almost exactly the same as HTML with some attribute names changed so they don't interfere with the JS. So for example, instead of using class, which JS has a class reserved keyword when we declare a class, so instead of using class in HTML, we use class name. We use HTML4, not 4, but FOR, instead of for, just regular for. We can use these curly braces to embed JS values and logic in JSX. So you cannot just mix JSX like really easily with JavaScript, but with those curly braces, it lets us do things like embed a value here. So we can do like this. Cats is not declared, but if it was, this is how we would dynamically render content to the component. We can return JSX from JS functions. So this is actually kind of leading into what we're going to talk about next, is components. Components are essentially functions that just return JSX. So as you can see, we're here. This is a render function and render methods on this class app, and we're returning a JSX element.
Vitaliy, can you just real quick explain how this gets compiled out and like even the node stuff? Because I know people ask about that too with like file extensions like JSX, and then how you actually have to compile it out for production.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So.
Can you repeat that question? Because I don't know if people can hear me.
Okay. So somebody asked how we can compile all of this to one file, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just something that I've been asked about before, and I know that's really important. It can be confusing when you're talking about languages that have different file extensions.
Oh, okay. So ES6 lets you break up into multiple files, and that's why we use these import statements. But this JSX extension, you can use JS extension. I only use this for syntax highlighting, and so we can do stuff like this. If this was a JS file, we would not be able to do this. But it wouldn't result in error or anything. So this is more of a preference than anything. If you don't want to use JSX extensions, you don't have to. But if we look at our terminal here, let's look at what it says. Again, sorry, I can't make this bigger. Oh, okay. Well. Okay, so.
Vitaliy, if you right-click on the header for that, go to Properties, where it says NPM, go to Properties.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, there.
Sweet. Did someone suggest that?
No, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, look, you made it bigger.
Well, instead of using magnifier.
Yeah, the magnifier is like terrible. Okay, so if we look at what it says here, when we ran npm start, what does it say?
Well, the point that I was making is when you actually compile it out, it goes into one or many JS files that can be deployed on any client side or any static server too.
Well, yeah, I was just going to show like how we do that. Okay, so if you're using run, normally this would be npm build, but whenever you start a React app, it tells you, note that the development build is not optimized. To create a production build, use yarn build. So React actually does compile everything to one file, and if we take a look here at the elements, we can see that but this script here, this is React put this here. This is everything that we wrote compiled into one file and then added at the bottom of the page so we can work with the JavaScript. So everything compiles down to this one file, and we do that with an npm run build or yarn build. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's move on. We can nest JSX elements just like HTML. So we can place JSX elements on the page using the React DOM library. So this is what I showed you at the beginning. Sure, I'll take one. Okay. So we can use that React DOM library to append a JSX element to the DOM. and you can see we're doing that in our index.js, react.dom.render, and here's where we're appending to the DOM our app. Okay, so we're about halfway through the talk here, so we should probably get started on writing the app. We can place JSX elements on the page using the React DOM library. React DOM checks an element and its children and only updates what's necessary. So the React DOM is actually a library that mounts on this, so it mounts your app on this root component that you define. And then everything in here is called everything after the root component, everything below it in the tree is known as a virtual DOM. And what React does when a component updates via state or prop is it checks the virtual DOM against the new DOM that would be coming from the update, and it checks the differences, and it only changes the differences in the real DOM instead of changing everything. So another reason why React is awesome is because the DOM is a very old, a very slow technology. So React at its heart is essentially a way to work around the DOM's limitations by not changing too much at once, only changing what's needed. And that's why React is so fast, because JavaScript is fast, the DOM is slow. That's how we should think about it. What's next? Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy this because it's hard to see. So this is how we declare a JSX component. As you can see, we're assigning it to a variable here. And then so we can also return them from functions. So this is just an arrow function with an implicit return statement, returning a JSX element. And then, like we saw before, this is how we actually append it to the DOM.
Make a call out the class name too, because that's the thing.
Oh, I talked about that before. Yeah, you may have been out of the React component. So let's talk about function components now. So we're now talking about components. React components are just functions that return some JSX. Components let us break up the DOM into independent reusable modules. Components accept arbitrary inputs called props. And when these inputs change, they are read-only values passed to a component, just like attributes in HTML. But if we want the value to be dynamic, we use those curly braces again, instead of the attribute, the quotes in regular HTML. So components re-render when props change, but only the children of the component that change actually get rendered to the DOM, to the actual DOM. To differentiate components from other JSX elements, we start them with a capital letter. And here's an example of a component. So it's just a function that accepts props, and it returns JSX. And then to use this component, we start with a capital letter as a JSX element. And then, like I said before, we can pass a property to it, and you'd call it an attribute in HTML, with a dynamic value or a static value with quotes. But if we want to use dynamic, we have to use these curly braces. Okay.
So, Vitaliy, I know that's been a discussion that we've had over the past few months. Now, with spending so much time in ReactJS, when do you decide to make something a component or not?
I think this talks about it here, this slide. We'll get to that in a second. Components can have other components in their output. So when you're rendering JSX from a component, it can have other JSX or other components in that output. Here's what Kevin was asking about. Abstraction is encouraged when working in React, although personally, I don't make like tiny components like buttons or anchor tags into components, because I think you might as well just use that one line of code instead of making it a component with 10 lines of code, and then eventually you're going to still have to use that one line because you're going to have to print that component out. And HTML, like JSX elements are almost like a replacement for HTML elements, but some HTML elements there's nothing wrong with. Like you might as well use them. There's no reason to use JSX instead. But React does encourage abstracting to as much as possible. And the way you do that is you can actually create JSX elements that accept other JSX elements that you can nest JSX inside of. So I think I have an example here. Yeah. So let's break this down here real quick. So this is a functional component that returns this JSX. Oh, one thing I should mention is when you're returning JSX from a component, you can only return one JSX element. You cannot, if I had another div below this div here, it would throw an error. We can only return one, but we can have many things inside of it. So if you have like 3 elements here next to each other, wrap them in a div to avoid the error. Okay, so we're returning header. We're returning a logo, which is a component because it starts with a capital letter. And then we're returning a nav, which is another component. And this nav, which is a component, has other components inside of it. So we're nesting it just like regular HTML. So let's take a look at what this nav component, how it's declared. So function nav, it accepts props. We're not passing any props, but it does accept them. So we're returning a div class header, and then what is this? Or actually, we are using props. So what is this? Props.children. This lets you specify where in the return JSX you want to place any components that would be nested like this in your component. So if I had like another div here and then like many other divs, I can put this exactly where I want. So these components will render exactly where I want in this output here. So I think that makes sense. Let's move on. We can also declare, okay, so now we're talking about class components. Actually, you know what? Let's get started working on the app because we're just going to use functional components to start with. Or let's just cover it real quickly. We're already using class components. We can also declare components with ES6 class syntax. This gives us access to state. State is a property on a class component, on a React component that allows it to be self-aware of when to re-render. So when state changes, the component knows to re-render. State is like props, but the component can change it, which will cause it to re-render and update any elements that are affected by this change. So the important difference here from props is that the component can change its own state, whereas a component cannot change its own props because they're passed down to it. So the class constructor method is a special method that gets executed when a React app first starts before a component is mounted. So we'll talk about the lifecycle methods in a little bit, but what you should know is that the constructor function runs before any of the other lifecycle methods, and before the JSX is actually rendered to the actual DOM. So we use that to initialize our components and do some prep work before we're ready to mount them into the DOM. If we want to use this, we would normally use it in the constructor function to initialize state. We would usually do this. In the constructor, we need to call super props before. So anytime we want to use this in the constructor, we have to call super props in the constructor before this. And the constructor needs to have props passed into it as an argument, which we have an example here in a little bit. The constructor method is the only place we can modify the state object directly. So elsewhere, we should use this set state. And this, using set state, lets React know that it's time to re-render. If we just modify the state directly, it will have no idea that it needs to re-render, and we'll have errors in our app, which changes the state and lets the component know if it's time to render. Okay. You should not call set state in the constructor method. You should just assign state directly because it doesn't actually, the constructor method is not executed when the DOM is there. So there's no need to worry about re-rendering because the DOM is not there yet. Class components continued. Set state accepts an object, and when called, it merges the object into the current state and then re-renders the component. So we'll go over this when we're actually in the code, but if you pass an object to set state, it's not going to just replace the state with that object. It's going to merge it in. but it only merges on the shallow level. So if your state has objects as properties in it, and you use set state and you pass another object, it's gonna replace that object. It's not gonna go through the object and drill into it and try to figure out what's different. It only works on the first level of properties. So React may batch set state updates for performance reasons. You should not rely on the state value being changed immediately when you call set state, and avoid directly passing the current state to set state, as it may change by the time set state is called. So if you're calling set state and you're somehow using the current state, you should know that once that state actually does get called, the state might not be what you think it is. So set state does have a callback to prevent this from happening. So you can pass, it accepts two arguments. One is an object that it merges on only the first level, and then the second argument is a function that is a callback. To change the state of a parent component, we need to pass a callback from the parent to the child as a prop that the child can then call with relevant data. So you can't change the parent state from a child component, but you can pass a method from the parent component that changes the state of the parent component to the child that then can call and change the parent's state via the callback. So it's actually the parent that's changing its own state, but the child calls a function on that parent component that does it, that lets it know it's time to do it. If two components are dependent on the same changing data, you should move that data to the state of their closest ancestor. So don't, if you have changing data, don't repeat yourself. Put it in the parent component and pass it down as props to your child components. Okay, so here's the syntax with state that we're going to go over real quick. So we're declaring a class images extends react.component. So this gives it all of those lifecycle methods and the props and the state. This is how we make a regular class a React component, is we are extending it. So we're passing properties and methods from the parent class, which is react.component, into images. And then we have access to things like this.setState, this.state, and then all the component lifecycle methods. And this is how we declare a state in the constructor, just an object. And then here we're using map to render some p tags. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to start working on the app. So we're going to go ahead and go into our app here, and we're going to wrap everything in a container. So we're going to type out div.container, and this is just using material.css to lay out our app a little bit here. Okay, so it looks like that didn't update. Oh, because I didn't save it. Okay, so now that I saved it, I think, am I? I'm in the wrong app. We'll just restart it. I don't know why that happened.
Meanwhile, any questions before we get to the demo?
Nothing so far.
Okay, so now you can see we have this class container inside our root. And in here, we can write some code to see if it renders. Okay, and it does render. Yeah, that is. So let's go ahead and, all right, so let's think about this. I'm actually going to go ahead and launch the other project in a separate PowerShell so we can look at it for reference. Okay, so we need this game component, and it's going to have this images component. So let's go ahead and make a game. Oh, that's a nice, cute cat. Okay. So let's go ahead and make our game component. So we're actually going to go ahead and make a folder in this src directory that is going to be called component. And then in here, we're going to make a new file called game.jsx. So how do we declare a class? This will have to be this component will need to make use of state because it's going to make AJAX requests. So we're going to import React from React. And then we're going to define this as a class-based component. So game extends React dot. Okay. So we're actually going to go ahead and write the constructor function method, and we're going to pass props to it. And props are coming from here, remember? Well, they're actually coming from the parent element, but this lets us access them. So we're going to go ahead and, we have to call super props before we can use this in the constructor. If this was a longer class, I would purposefully run into a bunch of errors, but I don't think we have time for that. So
I'm sure you'll have some errors.
I will anyway, yeah. So every component function okay. So the difference in syntax between class and function-based components is that there's a render method. So render, we're not just returning JSX, we're rendering JSX. So we're gonna call define a method called render on this class, and then we're gonna return from it. Let's just return some text for now. We'll call it h2 game. Okay, and now we have to export this class. Game. So the difference between export, you can export game, and then if you wanted to access it in app, for example, you would use this syntax. But if you want to just use this, you can use export default, which means that you don't have to ask for what you want. You'll just get this no matter what. And then here you assign that to React.
That's only if you have one class.
What?
That's only if you have one class in there.
What do you mean?
You have multiple classes. And then
Oh, yeah, well, that's what I mean. You can also do export like something else, like we have React available. That's not going to throw an error. And then, I don't know what is it saying? Declaration of statement expected. I don't know why it's not working.
the syntax, your highlighter might just
Okay, well, yeah, we'll deal with that another time. Most components will just use export default, and this is what you're exporting, the app component. Okay, so we've exported it here. So let's go ahead. Let's initialize the state real quick. So this dot state, and remember we can't use set state in the constructor method. Well, we can, but it's discouraged. But you should assign state directly in the constructor method. So if we go back to our previous app here, so we're going to need to keep track of this. So these are, let's call them concepts. So this is what the API comes back with, concepts. And then we have images. And then we have things like winning image or like how many images we have. But for now, let's just do images and concepts. So they're both going to be arrays because there's multiple items. And we want them to be ordered. And then concept. Okay. So let's go ahead and bring this into the app component. And the way we do that is we import We can call this whatever we want, but I'm going to call it app or game, just because. Do we export? Yeah, okay, we export game. So import game from, where is it? So it's in dot current directory / components / game dot JSX. Okay.
It's best practice. You should probably keep those the same name.
Yeah. I just thought I would mention that, explain like how that works. And this is how we render a JSX component, and we can pass props to it, but for now we're going to just keep it simple. As you can see, if it was a lowercase letter, it'd be red here, and yellow if it's. This is just a difference between JSX elements and React components. So let's see if we get that on our page here. Okay, cool, we have it, and it is in that container, so it's got some padding or margin.
So Vitaliy, that is like right there, like a pretty awesome thing that happened. So if you could explain, just I know it makes sense, but where that game in the HTML is going through, just walk back through that again. What you just did. That's
Okay.
the core of all of this.
Yeah, this is, but we're not passing any data yet. This is just,
The DOM from the game.jsx.
yeah. So let me just go back here real quick. So we're returning h2 game from React, from this game component. So when we execute it here, when we instantiate it, this class component, and this is just a weird syntax for instantiating. In other languages, it's very different from this. This instantiates game. The constructor method on game runs when our app is starting, before app is even mounted or game is mounted. So game already has state, and then when it's time to render, so when app is mounted and it calls this, it calls the render method on game, which then returns h2. So this essentially returns an h2 and just puts it here. One thing I'll show you that's really cool.
And show how that is in the browser, just because I know that's very basic, but it just renders the DOM.
Yeah, so root is where we mounted our app. Container is is what's in the app. It's, if you look at the app component, the top level component is called is a div with a class of container. So this is our app component rendering, and inside of it we're rendering in h2, which is coming from game. And then what if you wanted to put some HTML inside of this game? Or JSX elements, I should say. So how would we do that? So let's say we want to render in h3 with game is cool.
Game is cool. Good sentence.
Not the best sentence I've ever made, but it's pretty good. Let's do. Okay, so here we can just do we can embed JavaScript with these curly braces, and we can do this dot props. Oh, one other note: in function-based components, we just have props because they're passed as an argument into the function. But with classes, they get assigned to the classes this. So this dot props, and this dot state. So this dot props has a special property called dot children. That lets us specify where we render those nested elements. So as you can see, what's wrong here? Unreachable code. Okay, this is because why is it unreachable? Oh, I believe it's because we can only return one JSX element, so we can return this in a div. Oh, that's better. Okay, so now we're returning a div with h2 of game and this dot props dot children. So if we look,
You just did that really quick. That is actually a really, really important thing.
yeah, that's why I'm going over it. So we're nesting here a JSX element called h3 game is cool inside of game. So we don't actually have to pass h3 as a props to game. We can just render it right here. And this is really cool because we can actually pass props from this component here right into H3 without having to go through game. This is the main benefit of this .props.children. So if we look now, we should see a div with H2 of that says game, and then this .props.children right after that game, which is going to render this H3 is game is cool. So let's see if we have that. Yep, H2 game is cool. So that's how that works.
Game is cool.
Okay, what's next? So let's look at the previous app real quick. So now we need to let's see, should we do Ajax first or do the images component? Let's do the Ajax first now. So what we're gonna go ahead and install an npm library actually. So we'll go into this live one that we're working in, and we're gonna terminate the process. And the way you install libraries, so your app has dependencies in this package.json. Right now, its only dependencies are React DOM, React scripts, and React. So it relies on these to work correctly. But if we want to install a new one, we can go to we can do npm install, and that library we want is called Axios. This is going to let us make Ajax requests. But we can't just do this, because if you give this app to someone else or without the node modules folder, or you upload it to GitHub, which is often done, and someone does npm install, which installs all the dependencies, they won't have this Axios here. So in order to import it into our package.json, so anyone else npm installing the app will get this Axios package too. The way we do that is with the -- save flag. And this is going to save it into our package.json. So once it's installed, you'll see it will appear in our package.json. So this one's a rather large library. So while that's installing, let's go ahead and go to the documentation for Axios. This is not it. There we go. So as you can see, promise-based HTTP client for the browser in Node.js. This is really handy. As you can see, it has like 4 million installs or weekly downloads. Wow. So yeah, this is a very popular library that's going to let us make Ajax requests really easily. Let's see how this is going. Oh, it's still installing. I believe it's almost done now.
While this is happening, are there any questions?
Yeah, let's.
Trey wants to know why you use a PC.
Oh, because I like to. You can't see it here, but I brought like my entire like huge desktop, and I like just like playing around with the hardware and like building my own computer. And unfortunately, Windows is the only. Well, I actually don't mind Windows. I mean, if you I have enough experience with it where I know where its issues are at and like how to resolve them. But yeah, I mostly do it just. Okay, sorry. Cool. So we got back up and running here. I think the issue was with permissions in the documents folder. So we moved it out to another folder. So what I'm going to do now is I copied a bunch of markup from the app that I built earlier for this. And so we don't have to write it out. I'm just going to go ahead and place it here. This is just regular markup, HTML. It's slightly different than what we had. So now we have a nav with, we're actually going to extract this into its own component soon. So we have a nav with a list, 2 links. There's a container with a main section here. which is actually where we're gonna render our game, and then we're just gonna get rid of this. Okay, so let's see if that worked. Great, so we have a header now, and we still have the components that we had before. Okay, so we installed Axios, and we did the -- save flag, which, as you can see, put it in here along with the version number. So if anyone copies this app without the node modules folder and does npm install, they will we can be certain that they will have this Axios that we're using in our app. So our app is dependent on Axios. And we're going to go into the game component. This is where we're actually going to use it, and we're going to import it. So we're going to import, and let's just call it Axios. Again, we can call this whatever we want from, and because it's a library, we don't have to do a file extension or a file path. So we just import Axios from Axios. And then just to make sure we have it imported, let's go ahead and console.log it in our constructor function. And this way we can take a look at what it is. So if we look at the console here, we can see that it's a function, and it has a bunch of methods on it and stuff. Remember, essentially in JavaScript, classes are just functions. So, but I think this might just be just a function. So we're going to use this to make AJAX requests. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a method that's going to go out and fetch some images. So get images. And if I declare this as a regular function method on a class, I wouldn't have access to the classes this. So I'd have to do this dot, no, not that, images equals this dot get image
I hate when things like that happen.
dot bind. This is a special keyword that lets us bind the classes this. And then again, we can use this in the constructor because we use super props and we pass it as props in the constructor. Otherwise, this would not work. So we don't need to console.log this anymore. So instead of doing this for every single function, we're just going to get rid of this. And we're going to declare it as an arrow function. So technically, we're declaring here a property on this class called getImages, and we're assigning an arrow function to it. So let me check the other code real quick. Okay, so we're not passing anything into it. We're just going to use Axios to make a AJAX request here. So we're going to do Axios. And then the first argument is going to be the URL. So before we do this, let's go to Unsplash, and I'll show you real quick how to make an API key for this app. So I already have one, but if you don't have one, you're going to go to api.unsplash.com, and you're going to register as a developer. You don't need to put your credit card or anything like that. Just first name, last name, email, username, and password. Once you join, you'll have access to 50 requests per hour, and to get your API key, you can go to, not on API. To get your API key, you can go to your apps. You can make a new app here. And then here at the bottom there, you'll see your API key. It's right around there. Keys at the bottom. Actually, it doesn't matter if I expose them, but it's limited to 50 per hour. And I can always make a different one too, or delete this one. So this is, what is this? This is our access key, right? But we need the URL. So let's go to the documentation in a new tab. So location. Eventually you'll get good at reading API docs like this, but if you're not, don't worry about it. It's we're just going to grab the API's location, which is api.unsplash.com. and we're going to put that as the first part of our string here. So this lets Axios know where to go and make the request, the network request to. And then if we go to photos, get a, let's do the query, search photos. Yeah, search photos. So we're going to get location, this is implicit here, slash search slash photos. So whatever we have before, slash search slash photos.
I think we'll do a weekend workshop on APIs, just like introduction, and then also maybe like some proxy stuff too.
Okay. I'm actually going to go ahead and not use this here, but I'm just going to pass it an object of properties, one of which can be URL. Again, don't worry about this Axios stuff. We're just know that we're making an AJAX request, and if you want to learn more about it, it has very good documentation over on the NPM here. Is what I'm doing here. So you can do axios.get, axios.post, but what I'm actually doing here is axios config. So just axios, and then we define a whole bunch of stuff here. Where? Oh, thanks. And I'm also not using the arrow, fat arrow for the arrow function here. So this is going to be an object of configuration. So URL string slash search slash photos. This is 2 strings. Then method. This is going to be our type of request. So get, post, or like these are just what are they called? I forget the word. No, but there's a HTTP verb, yeah. So this is going to be our HTTP verb. Thanks, Sandy. So for this, I believe we're supposed to do a get. Let's look at the API documentation. What?
Did you learn that studying computer science in college?
Let's look here. So we just do a get to slash search slash photos, and we can pass parameters here, such as one of them is that we're going to pass is query, and the other one is count. Let's go to random query. Actually, we're going to use this one. Sorry, we're going to use slash photos slash random, and then from here we're going to use the query and count. So slash photos slash random. Method is going to be a get, like we saw there. And then let's take a look at Axios again. Data. So we need this. I believe we actually pass it as params, but let's take a look at the API docs again. Yeah, params. So we need query and count. So we're going to declare an object inside this object called params. So query and count. Let's do 8. This is how many images we want. And then we're going to use a dot then callback because this Axios function returns a promise. Dot then, and we're going to pass it a function of data, or function with an argument data, which it will return to us after the request is complete. And let's just console.log it for now. So let's see. Oh, we never called this. So we're going to call it in the constructor. So this dot get images.
Can you adjust your shirt just a slight bit?
To what?
Just pull down.
Down. Okay. Uncaught error in promise. Request failed. So what are we doing wrong here? Oh, we're not passing our API key. So where do we pass this? If we go to authenticating here, public actions. To authenticate requests in this way, pass your application's access key via HTTP authorization header. So we're going to do another object with that's going to be called headers. These are HTTP headers. And what were the ones again? we need the authorization header. And these are standard, like when this request gets sent out, this is going to say authorization, and then whatever we put in here, which is going to be key, and then your access key, which we can, I don't know if it's still copied, so we're going to copy it again. So this is our key. Let's go ahead and define it as a constant up here. And then we can just use this instead. But remember, we have to use backticks with template literals. Okay. Let's see if this works. So 401, I believe this is unauthorized. Yeah, unauthorized. So we, what I'm actually going to do is, here, let me look at how I did it over here. Headers. Oh, client ID, not key. Key is for the other API that we're going to use. So client ID. Cool. Yay, we got data back. Look at this. So we have 8 images of cat. What are we going to do with these images? So let's go ahead and assign them to the state. We already have an image. And just really quickly, the reason I initialize them as an array is because later we're going to do array.map and return a bunch of JSX elements that are going to be those images. But if the images are not yet there, if we do array.map on undefined, it's going to throw an error. But if we do array.map on an empty array, it's not going to throw an error. It's just not going to print anything because there's nothing in the array. So this is a way of preventing errors. So if we look at this, what we got back, so we got back an object that has a property data. Data is an array of 8 items. So let's go ahead and extract that. So we're getting this data, we're console logging, is an object, right? And we want the property on the object called data. So data.data. And then that's an array of 8 images. So what are we going to do with this? Let's go ahead and call this dot set state. And set state, you pass an object to with the values that you want to modify. So you don't need to use this in set state because it's we're already using it here. You just define the state. So we're going to change images, and we're going to assign them a value of data.data. So, and then after this happens, so with this dot set state, you can pass it a second argument that is a callback. This is going to be a little tricky syntax here, but bear with me. So this is a callback that gets called after set state does its thing. So we're going to console.log this dot state dot images. Okay. So let's see what happened now. So we've successfully passed our images into the state. As you can see, we're constantly.logging the value out of the state. So what can we do with these images? Let's go ahead and make another images component that we're going to render here. So I'm going to go into the components and create a new file, and we're going to call it images.jsx. Import React from, actually, you know what, I'm just going to copy this here. Let me look real quick at So we're returning a container with, so we're just going to copy this and then get rid of the actual code in there because we're going to rewrite it. Okay, so this is just for the material CSS markup. So we're going to return 2 rows. This is using their grid, and each row is going to have some images in it. And the reason we're using 2 rows is just because there's 8 of them. We want to space them out more on the page. So we've created this images component. Let's export something so we know it's the images component. And then in game, we're going to go ahead and import it up here. Okay.
Can you post the code that you just pasted into the chat?
Well, I'm going to have this entire project be available after the presentation. Is that fine, or should I? Is someone following?
I was trying to follow along.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, what I can do, what's a quick way to share like a project like this?
So I think.
Okay, I can just paste.
Wanted that
paste it in the chat.
Okay. I'm gonna have to stop sharing for a second. Where's the chat?
It's highlighted in orange.
Oh, there we go. Cool. Oh man, someone's gonna have to format this, but actually, I'll go ahead and just grab it from here since we're gonna be rewriting this. Let's just do this entire images component. Okay, cool. There we go. Start sharing again. Okay, so we're back in game, and we're going to import the newly created images component. Import. We're going to call it images from. Where are we? We are in components, so we just grab the current directory and then /images.jsx. Okay, so now we've imported it, and let's go ahead and instead of this.props. We'll keep the game for now, but instead of this.props.children, I think you guys understand how that works now. We're going to go ahead and render the images component. And while we're here, let's go ahead and pass our first prop to images, which, no, not prop. We're going to call it images equals. And we could do this to assign a static value, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to actually pass the value from the state of this component. So this.state.images, we're going to pass the value as a prop to the images component because it's relying on that data. Okay, and this will be available as this.props.images in the images component, or props.images, but we're going to make it a class component. Okay, so we see images on the page now, and if we take a look at the markup real quick here, so we have div ID root, we have class app, we have our nav here, which is we haven't made this into a component yet, but we will. So then we have our container. This is the main. This is the last thing that we're exporting from the app component, this main. And inside of here, we're exporting a div, which we are exporting from game actually. So this this here is the beginning of the game component, and then the game component ends here. This is now the beginning of the images component. And as you can see, we have the images in 2 rows. So you can see how this nesting kind of works and how the data is going to flow from top down. So now we have, let's go into images and make sure we got this data correctly. So we're going to go ahead and I guess we don't really need a constructor here. Oh, wait, no, we're going to use state, so we're going to, yeah. So the first thing we're going to do is super props, so we can call this. So we're going to console.log this dot props dot images. Okay, so we're just making sure we got the images in the images component, and it looks like we do. Let's get rid of the other console.log so we don't get confused. So we're just going to get rid of this callback here. Okay. Oh, looks like we did not get the data in the images component. So what went wrong? Dot then. Let's see. Oh, it's because we're using it in the constructor method. So this is before the component mounts or updates or anything like that. So we're going to use our first lifecycle method here. Component did mount. This gets called immediately after the component gets actually mounted into the DOM. So immediately after the user can see this component on the page, we can run some code. So let's do that. So it looks like we're still not getting it. So let's try another method. Let's say component did update. So when the state, remember when the state of the parent component changes, because we're passing that state as props, this component is also going to update. So let's try it in here. Oh, look, we got it. Cool. So you can kind of see like how this component, let's go back to the presentation and talk about them for just a little bit. JSX events. So essentially these are like on click and on submit in HTML, but they're for JSX, and they don't take a string as a argument, they take an actual function. So you can pass event handlers to JSX elements to easily listen for user interaction. And we're going to deal with this in a little bit. I'm just going to go over it with this slide right now, but in a little bit we actually write code for this. So you can pass event handlers to JSX elements, okay, so to listen for user interaction. These are mostly used with forms, but can be used elsewhere, like we will be using. And then if we have time at the end, we will like write a form or in the follow-up video. Unlike vanilla JS, you pass a function rather than a string. So this is what it would look like. On click, this dot handle click. Some event handlers pass an event argument to the function you provide, which you can use to get information about the JSX element that called that function. So you can use event.target to access the DOM node or the React node that called this function. And remember, you're passing this function to that node. So when it calls it, you get information about that node. But you also get information like, you also have properties on that event, like prevent default, which when you're submitting a form in HTML, the event, it refreshes the page. But if you have a handle submit method, for example, on your class, and you pass an event to it when somebody submits a form, and the first thing you do is if you call event.prevent default, it will prevent from the page refreshing. And you can also do events disappear very quickly, so if you don't use them immediately, they're gone. But you can do event.persist to prevent it from disappearing, to stay for a little bit longer. To prevent default HTML behavior like a page refresh, yeah. So let's talk about the component lifecycle now. React components are constructed, as we talked about before, and then placed into and taken out of the DOM tree as a consequence of state prop updates. So if say a parent component updates and it no longer wants to render a child component, that child component will get taken out of the DOM tree. React still knows about it, it's still constructed, but it's going to get taken out. And then if for some reason the parent component wants to render it again, it's going to get placed back into the DOM tree. The DOM is just a binary tree, so like when you look at this is basically top-down nesting. So it's like a top-down, like an inverted tree React provides special methods at specific instances in this process of take place into and taken out of the DOM, which lets you run code at that moment. So we're just going to go, there's a lot of them that are like completely useless except for like one instance, but there's like 3 or 4 that you use all the time. So we're just going to cover those 3 or 4 and not the super weird ones, which were actually auto-completing before, which Kevin and I were laughing at. So lifecycle methods are useful for code that is dependent on the DOM being there. For example, removing event listeners and timers right before the component is taken out of the DOM with component will unmount. So component will unmount is a little bit different than component did mount in that it runs immediately before a component unmounts. So any interaction you want to have with the DOM before it's gone, you want to do in this method. In larger apps, it is important to clean up resources used by components when it is unmounted. And just to avoid weird bugs, you want to make sure you don't have memory leaks in your application. So component lifecycle in order. So what happens first? Constructor. Then we have render. So the first render pass renders everything on the page. If for some reason, okay, so that's mounting. And after render is done, remember immediately after the component is mounted into the DOM, we have component did mount, which we can use to run code immediately after the component first appears to the user. So updating. So when a component updates, it's going to run render again because it needs to re-render. And then it's going to call a function with component did update, which is essentially runs right after the re-render, and it has the new DOM that you can work with. So if you want to make updates because the DOM changed, this is the method that you would do it in. And if you see here, if in our app, when game finally gets that AJAX request back, it's going to update the state, which is going to cause this to re-render, right? So it's going to re-render images. So images is going to re-render because the props changed. So it's going to re-render, and then it's going to call component did update. So when those images do come back in this re-renders, that's why we're able to see them printed out, is because we used them in the correct method. But in component did mount, when the AJAX didn't come back yet, so we got an empty array. But we didn't get an error because we initialized it with that empty array. So unmounting is just one method. Component will unmount, and like I said, it runs before the DOM disappears, immediately before. Okay, so let's get back into coding. So we'll just get rid of this one for now. So what did I want to do here? So we, because we're using props and not state here to deal with images, we don't actually have to, a common mistake would be to take this.props.images and assign it to state here. You don't want to do this because there's no reason to. You just use props. They still will re-render the component. So let's go ahead and render these images to the page. So how are we going to do this? We're going to use an array.map. Okay, so well, let's run into this error on purpose, but I'll explain. This will just be a small error. So in this row, we're gonna do this. And remember, we're writing embedded JavaScript, or not embedded, but JavaScript. It has to be wrapped with curly braces. This dot images dot props dot images dot, well, let's just do for each because we don't need to return that other array. For each takes a function with, so we're going to need both of the the values that you pass to it. So we're going to need a single image, and we can call this whatever we want. Remember, this is just a, but usually it's commonplace to call it whatever the singular of this is, of the array that you're trying to map or for each on. So images, and then we're going to grab the index also because we're going to need it. And then let's do our fat arrow and this. So for each images item, we're gonna return what are we gonna return? We're gonna return an image tag, right? Image. So src, what's the src gonna be? Oh, and I'm actually gonna stop this from launching those AJAX requests until, because of that 50 image limit, we don't want to hit that too early. We don't need that. So src equals, and if we look at our app here, I actually do need those images. So how do we get a single image's source? So we go array index, and then we have properties in here, and then we have a property called URLs, and we have different sizes of this image. We'll just go with regular. So index of array dot URLs dot regular. So src is going to equal image. Remember, this is the singular dot. Yeah. So no image. Oh, yeah, because it's the singular image, we don't need to do the index of dot URLs dot regular. So we're passing this src attribute, which src prop that gets converted to an attribute when this actually gets rendered as an HTML element. And then it's going to require an alt prop, but we'll just leave that empty for now. Okay, so, well, let's just see what this looks like for now. Okay, so it looks like we're not rendering anything. Yeah, so what happened here? If you look at this, we're returning images, right? We're rendering this.props.images, and we're doing a for each on it, right when this render method gets called, right? But if you remember back to the component lifecycles, render actually gets called right after the construct, when the render gets called before component did mount, and more importantly, well, it should actually get called before when the component updates. But we can fix this though with, let me see. Okay, so I'm just gonna use a quick, just make sure I'm not doing something stupid. Okay. So let's just try this, see if it fixes it. We're gonna do this dot props. And this is the cool thing about the conditional operators. You can use it without the curly braces. This dot props dot images. So we're gonna check if images are there. So if images, we're going to return this. And then else, we're going to return something called react.fragment. This renders out, when it renders to the DOM, it renders out to nothing. So not even a div tag. We could just render an empty div or null, but this is, when the DOM actually gets rendered, this is cleaner. Let's see if that fixes it. Okay, so we still don't have any images. This is the point where you would want to do a little bit of debugging. So in this render method, we're going to just console.log this dot props.images, and we're going to take it out of here. So let's see what we get when this renders. So the first time we get an empty array, and then it re-renders, and we get an array of 8 images. So why are these images not displaying? So let's take this out of here. So this .props.images.for each. Let's console.log image. So So for each image, let's see what each one of them looks like. So we are getting the data down to the images here. So we're returning. Oh, okay. So actually, we cannot use for each. We have to use map because for some reason for each doesn't work in React like map does. Oh, it's because for each doesn't return anything. Map actually returns. Remember, it returns an array of the new values. So the new value is this new image that we're doing for each one. So now this will work. But hopefully you got to see how I do my debugging. So I start at like where I know for sure it's going to be, we're going to have the data, and then just move the console.log down until you see where it messes up.
For sure, debugging was just you going, oh, that was it, and then you realize.
Oh, just this how I do it. So cool. So look at this. We got some images. Cute cats. Let's go back here and format them a little bit. So what we're actually going to do on the state of the images is we're going to declare image styles, or style. And this is how one way of doing styles in React. Generally, you just want to have all your styles in CSS, but if for some reason you want to have like super dynamic styles, you can use this syntax here. So let's see what properties did I give that.
15 minutes in the traditional time.
Okay, well, we'll get it where we get, I guess. Unless people want to stay after and see the finished app. So image style is, we're going to give it a padding of 3 pixels, height of 150, and object fit cover. So let's go ahead and do that in our images. Oh, in here. Okay. So now on this image element, and I'm just going to go ahead and, because we're going to have so many props, I'm going to go ahead and break this out into a way of dealing when you have with a lot of props. And it looks kind of like jQuery, but that's fine for now for this purpose. Okay, so what we're going to get? Oh, style. Style equals okay. So you can see now our images have some styles, but there's still too many of them. There's still too many of them in this one row. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. Generally, you wouldn't want to do it this way. You would want to extract this to a function. But just for the time's sake, we're going to repeat ourselves here just this once. So here, let's see what happens when we do this.
Side note, you probably shouldn't have done height, but I guess because these are various things. But.
So as you can see, we're still getting a lot of images in this row, but also a lot of images in this row. And they're the same images. So we're going to have to break up this array somehow. So what I would say is let's do .slice like we did before here. So we're just adding, we're just modifying images before we call map on it. So .slice. And let's do first index 0. And we're going to do 4 images. Let's see if that works. Cool, so we only have 4 images here, but we still have 8 here. So let's do here, let's start at, we'll start at index 3 and go 4 more. Something went wrong. Okay, so we're only getting, looks like 4 images here and only 1 here. So let's quickly go to MDN to see if I'm using this method correctly. Slice, okay. So the way you read this is slice takes a begin and an end. So it actually does have a starting index and then an ending index. So we're going to start at 3 and end at, let's say, how many images do we have? So if, well, no, let's start at 4 and end at 8, right? 9. All right, cool. So looks like we have our the first 4 images, and then this last 4 images. So we've broken them up. And I'm missing a few styles here. Let me check something here real quick. Oh, the images are missing this class name, so we're going to add it to, so it gets the styles from materialized CSS. So we're going to go ahead and give it a class name, attribute, or prop. So now it should be much prettier. Okay, there's our images. Okay, so we have our images. Now, I guess let's just jump into events and see how we can extract a value from an image when we click on it, and then we'll do the second API thing. So we're going to declare a method on this class called handle img click. Make it an arrow function, and we're going to go ahead and pass that event variable to it. And then with our images, remember this is actually like 4 images, so each one of them is going to have this onClick method. So src, and then onClick equals this dot, and we don't need to use state or props because this is a method on the class. This dot handle image click. And we don't need to execute it here. We're just passing it its definition. We're not executing it like we would like this. And this will automatically send that event. So let's go ahead and console.log the event. All right, so if we take a look at our, just real quick, we're going to do each child in a list should have a unique key prop. And this key prop, unfortunately, you cannot use for your own purposes. React only uses it. So if you want an ID, you have to pass a separate ID. And we're just going to pass it this index that we define here because we know it's going to be unique. Okay, so that arrow went away. So let's clear this and click on some images. So we clicked on an image and we got this thing back. This is the event object, and it has a bunch of methods on it. But the property that we're gonna use is target. This is the HTML element of, and you can see the event went away. So I can no longer access this target. But what if I do event.persist and then console.log the event? I'm gonna just show you this real quick so you are aware of its existence, in case you ever run into an issue with it. What? Should I? No. Is anyone tuning out?
And then let's ask if there's questions, and then we can continue.
Okay. So we're going to click on an image again. And now, if we go to target, you can see the event persisted, and we actually do have this target, which is, what is it? It's an image with a class of the class that we gave it. The classes that we gave it. And then it also has this data set if you want to use data dash something in HTML, if you want to define custom attributes, which we're going to do a little bit later. Yeah, so let's go ahead and access the data.target instead now. Event.target. So what do we have from here? So if we click on this image here, oh, something went wrong. Okay, so it was that event persist for some reason it wasn't working. So now we get the actual image element, and the image element that we clicked on specifically. So we'll get a different URL, as you can see, for each one of these. These URLs are different. So, okay.
Yeah, so can you go to your final one and then just kind of walk through like the final product really quick in the last few minutes here, and then we can continue to go through it or see if people
Okay,
have
sure.
questions on it. And like go to the actual finalized demo to show what that does again and then relate it.
Oh wait, that's not the actual demo, is it?
Vitaliy, are you gonna post this on GitHub somewhere or provide it?
Yeah, sure. I'll make a repository for it. I'll do that after this presentation.
Okay. Yeah, Tad wants to know if it'll be available to look at in the final state.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Where did this go?
Sorry if that distracts you.
Oh, I forgot this didn't update. No worries. Cool. So we're just going to drag this over to...
Can you hide that thing? It's like in the middle of the screen.
Yeah, this thing is so annoying. But, okay.
It's a different port, I think.
No, I think this is the one. It's just not rendering for some reason. Oh, because I removed those route variables. Okay, here we go. This is always so much fun. Okay. Okay, so in this app, and we're going to continue to finish this as much as we can, but this is something that normally takes longer than 3 hours. But I'm gonna try to make a follow-up video where we actually do finish this. So let's see. We have if we go to the code here, we have our app component just like we had before. We have our index.js, except now we're using React Router, which we'll set up. We're only like very basic, doing very basic explanation of React Router, but it's enough where you can start using it. There's much more to it. So it renders our router and the app inside of it. Now if we go to app, so now instead of directly writing our components here, we're using routes. So the app is only for rendering like our nav and our routes here. So the actual logic of the game happens in this game logic, where we have our state with images, concepts, when index, which is set to -1, so it returns false when it's not when it's not set, and then game over false, because we want to stop the game when the user clicks on the right or the wrong image. And then here we're just doing binding just to show how it is. And in the game, when it first sets off, we're getting the images, right? So we're getting the images just like we did just now. And then we are doing the response. And for each image in the response data array, we can use for each here because we don't have to return JSX. We're just doing JavaScript logic instead of returning JSX. So we're going to do image.index. We're adding an index to this image just so we can reference it later. And then we're setting the state with the data that we just got back. And then after we set the state, And then after we set the state, we're passing a callback to the set state method called get image classification. This is where we're connecting to another API, the machine learning one, where the headers are slightly different, and then the data is where they want it this exact way. So we have to do this like exactly how it is here. And here we're using async and await with the promises. So as you can see, I'm setting. How am I doing this? Oh yeah, so async const response equals await this Axios function. Once it comes back, we're going to continue execution and do our and get our concepts that we get back from the API, and we're going to set them to the state. But we're only going to set the first 6, or the first 5. So from 0 to 5. I guess from 0 to 4 technically. So then we have these functions here: end game, reset game, and here we're doing that logic with the concepts though instead of the images. So it's very similar to what we did before. We have this button that on click, it does this dot reset and then this dot get images. This is the first function. So when we hit play, this dot get images launches, and this dot get images calls itself, not itself, but it itself calls this dot get image classification. So then after this function is finished, this one gets called, and then we have all our data and we can start the new round of the game. So this is our images component. We're doing very similar things, except we're passing more props here. One of the props we're passing is correct. I'm actually not using the data attribute here because it worked without it, but I guess I would recommend using data in front of this and then using that data set object to access the data. So I'm using correct is equal if index of the image that we passed to it earlier, or no, this is actually the index that gets passed to it from the map function. So if the index of the image we're rendering equals this dot props dot win index, which we set before over here. Where did we set it? So rand image, rand index, and rand image, and then this will say win index equals rand index. So we're choosing a random image essentially, and then saving its index, and then we're comparing its index over here to the index of the image that is being rendered, and if it's correct, we're adding like a green. Well, let's just go through this handle image click method here. So when you click on an image, if game over, nothing happens. But if the game is not over, we're gonna set is correct to extract that event.target.correct that we set over here. We're gonna extract that value. And so actually, the game knows when the images are rendered which one is correct, but it's not going to show it to the user until you click on an image. So this dot props dot images dot for each, we're comparing if the if is correct is true, if that target did match the win index and it is the correct image. If you clicked on the correct image, we're just adding a 5-pixel solid green border to the image that you clicked on. But if not, we're adding a red border to that image. We're ending the game, and then we're, this is kind of weird, but I'll explain this in a second. Then we are, so this is a CSS selector that lets us find an image with an attribute of index that is equal to the win index. So we're selecting this image from the DOM, and then we're giving the style, of the green border. So the one you clicked on gets a red border, and the one that is actually correct gets a green border. Question?
Vitaliy, when you're doing React work, could you maybe give a couple of ideas for where you go to get unstuck or find out API details?
The greatest place to get unstuck is, and don't immediately go to Stack Overflow or search for Google. You should first go to ReactJs docs. They have like literally the best docs like of any like front-end application or any like, these are like the best docs I've ever seen. So if you go to main concepts, this is like the easy stuff here. They just walk through like all of the JSX that I covered, introducing JSX, rendering elements, components, and props. And they give you like very specific. They say things like very specifically that will help you weed out your bugs. But you actually do have to read all of this carefully. State and life cycle. Like for example, I'll show you here is using state correctly. There are three things you should know about set state. Do not modify state directly. State updates may be asynchronous. State updates are merged. So these are things that they say right here in their, like, on pretty much the front page of their docs. But these are literally the most common errors any like entry React developer will run into. So if you just go and read this before you start really like writing big apps, you'll have a much more pleasant time writing in React because you'll run into less bugs.
So the answer to the question is the ReactJs side of it, probably the API that you're using.
The API, every API should have docs that you can access, and they'll tell you.
Console logging is also a great tool, and there's.
I just exclusively. There's like you can do debugging, like actual debugging in JavaScript, but it's kind of like. I don't know. It's just sometimes it's easier to just write console.log, and it's right there you get the value.
Do you want to show the demo of the final product just really quick, and then we'll take some questions?
The final product is just this game. It does have this other route, but there's nothing here. It's just for the sake of using React Router. So you can see /game, and then if I click here, without refreshing, it goes to /classify. So this component is not re-rendered. Only this component is re-rendered, like the main section.
Can you play the game?
Yeah. So you can see it. So car, vehicle, hood, transportation system, harass. What is that? Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's referring to this picture here. So as you can see, this is correct. And the cool thing about this game is, like, I should have said this earlier, but this info is not coming with images. The machine learning classifier has no idea what's in this image, but it uses machine learning to figure out what's in the image. So this actually just re-renders everything and starts a new game. So cat, eye, cute, animal, kitten. So this is a little bit more difficult, but I would say pick the wrong one. Okay, so probably not. Oh, that was the right one. I thought it was this one.
All right, play again. Pick the wrong one.
So cat, sleep, portrait. So a cat that's not sleeping. This guy is definitely not sleeping.
Yeah, so this is what like Vitaliy was showing earlier with like the class that was adding on there, which is using the.
Yeah. This is so if you look at this image specifically here, we can see it has a correct is false. So this is not the correct one, but this is the correct one. So you can see all those values being generated, like exactly how we specified them to be generated.
All right. So any questions? Are people having to jump off here?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah. Tad has to leave,
Okay.
and we're down to Trey.
All right.
Okay. Well, sorry about the time cutoff, but hopefully that was informative enough to get started with React. And then, like I said, we'll probably do a follow-up video to finish out the app. And I will make a repository for this app so you can check it out in more detail. I'll probably clean it up a little bit before I do that too.
Yeah, so we'll send that out with video recording and all of the information for today. So that'll probably go out in
Tomorrow.
well, but the repo, and you have the repo ready tomorrow.
Yeah, by tomorrow for sure.
Yeah, we'll have the repo, the slides, the playback video, and follow-up information. And then if anyone has any questions afterwards, like specific videos they want us to do, we can follow up with that.
Okay. Well, we at least connected to one API, so you saw how to deal with asynchronous data and the components re-rendering. That's really a big thing in React that you have to wrap your head around is how to know when components are rendering and what data is available to them at that time, and then dealing with asynchronous code like AJAX requests.
Cool. All right. Well, I guess that's that. Unless there's any last-minute questions.
Nope.
All right. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining.
Cool.
Thanks, Vitaliy. You are the man.
Goodbye, everyone.